happens. Well, breaking news this hour. The US President Barack Obama has confirmed that Osama bin Laden has been killed in a special operation in Pakistan. The news flashed around the world, with the US claiming it's now in possession of his body. And RT's Lucy Kafanoff has the latest from Washington, D.C.
U.S. President Barack Obama addressed the nation to announce, in fact, that the United States can finally confirm that Osama bin Laden has been killed by U.S. Special Forces. We're hearing that it was not a drone attack. This was actually a firefight on the ground by U.S. Special Forces right outside of Islamabad. There was a firefight that was exchanged. Osama bin Laden had reportedly been shot and killed in the head, and his body is apparently now in U.S. custody. So the president addressed the nation right now to just earlier ago to announce this major development. And also, we are just blocks away from the White House right now, where there have been hundreds of people who have gathered right outside of the White House in celebration of the developments that bin Laden has been confirmed killed by U.S. President Barack Obama. In fact, even as I was making my way to the studio, we've seen cars driving by, honking, American flags waving, and people continue to make their way down towards the White House to celebrate this news that, in fact, has the United States has been pursuing for the past decades since the 9/11 attacks. It's been 10 years in Afghanistan, nearly since the 10 years since the 9/11 attacks, which really started the active hot conflict on the ground in Afghanistan. But we cannot forget that the roots of conflict so often go back to foreign policy decisions made years and years ago. And while the president did say in his speech tonight that the American people did not choose this fight came to the United States in U.S. soil, referencing, of course, the 9/11 attacks. We have to remember that the United States policy of covertly arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan back in the 80s had, of course, contributed so much to the current situation that we have on the ground today. And it's one of those things that, unfortunately, in Washington sort of gets really lost in the mix. We don't really see the consequences of certain foreign policy actions as they relate to the present news developments on the ground.
Well, to look back into how Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda became a major terrorist movement, we're joined live in the studio by RT's military analyst, Colonel Evgeny Khrushchev. Thank you for joining us here. And, of course, the US was meddling in Afghanistan in the 80s. You have first-hand experience of that. How did that lead to what Al-Qaeda became?
Well, I have to clarify, the United States didn't meddle in Afghanistan in the 80s. It was a perpetrator of the anti-Soviet jihad, which was used as a proxy war against the Soviet Union by the medium of the jihadi counterinsurgency. And, in fact, the whole this Osama bin Laden was in the second stage when the anti-Soviet jihad on the second stage when America was almost officially joined in from the covert to overt aggression against Afghanistan and the Soviet Union by default. They started recruiting the mercenaries from the Arab countries, thus trying to spread the Wahhabis and Salafism into the peaceful Sufi Muslim religion of Afghanistan, mostly. And that's at that time it was Osama bin Laden turned out as one of the main financier and organizer of the Arab mercenaries who came to make money and to spread their violent and extremist ideology, which was financed jointly by the Saudi Arabia, but mostly it was led, directed, and trained by the United States of America and orchestrated by the Central Intelligence Agency. It was really interesting to notice that the current outgoing Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, at that time, 30 years ago, it was under his direction when he was in charge of the CIA, when they kick up this can of worms and started as freedom fighters that 30 years later was rebranded as terrorists.
Are there any parallels with what's happening in Libya then? Because we're seeing US backing for anti-Gaddafi rebels. Some are saying there could be Islamist rebels in there as well. Are lessons not being learned from Afghanistan, the history there?
As far as the parallels, I would be more cautious jumping to a conclusion that there are direct parallels. However, for me, there is one parallel talking about the two senators. The Senator Wilson, remember that the American proxy war against the Soviet Union, when they tried to manage the anti-Soviet jihad, was called Wilson's War. So it reminded me late Senator Wilson when Senator McCain came to Benghazi and he said about the rebels, "These are my heroes." It somehow harks back into my memory when the American senators were hugging and kissing the freedom fighters and all those mercenaries who came to Afghanistan fighting the Soviet Union. So I would caution about the parallels. On the other side, I see a very weird similarity, the way that some American hawks trying to embrace with their trying to embrace the unknown known for them in Libya. Plus, as it's well known that as Admiral Stavridis, who is the Supreme Commander of NATO, he was the first to caution that there is a flicker of intelligence that among the rebels there are elements of Al-Qaeda. I cannot say the American intelligence community cannot stipulate that they're in charge, but that the rebels have been penetrated by Al-Qaeda members, that's for sure.
Okay, Colonel Yevgeny Khrushchev, thank you very much for those insights here on RT.